You're cruising at 37,000 feet. Business as usual. Then the cabin fills with smoke. The oxygen masks drop. And through your window you watch the engine literally tear itself apart in a ball of fire. Welcome aboard British Airways Flight 762, where a routine hop across Europe turned into every passenger's worst nightmare. And somehow, against impossible odds, everyone walked away. Some limped, but they all lived to tell about it. So how does a brand new Boeing 777 nearly fall out of the sky over one of the world's busiest cities? Stick around, because this story gets wild. Let's set the scene. 2015. A Tuesday. The kind of day where nothing interesting is supposed to happen. British Airways Flight 762 is scheduled for a short flight from London Heathrow to Oslo, Norway. About 2 hours in the air. The kind of flight where you barely finish your complimentary beverage before descent. The aircraft. A Boeing 777-200. Registration G. Vivers. Only 11 years old. Practically a teenager in airplane years. These things are built like tanks. Twin-engine wide bodies that airlines absolutely love. Fuel-efficient, reliable, and with a safety record that made them the workhorse of long-haul aviation. This particular bird had flown over 50,000 hours without breaking a sweat. On board 157 passengers and 13 crew members. Families heading to Norway for vacation. Business travelers with laptops and terrible coffee. A few nervous flyers gripping their armrests during taxi. Nobody expecting their flight to make international headlines. The captain that day had logged over 12,000 flying hours. The first officer, another 6,000 hours. Combined, these two had more flight experience than most people have hours awake. They'd seen it all. Turbulence, equipment failures, medical emergencies. This was supposed to be the easiest flight of their week. At 11:53 a.m. local time, Flight 762 pushed back from Gate 548 at Terminal 5. Heathrow was its usual organized chaos. Planes taking off every 45 seconds. Controllers juggling traffic like a high-stakes game of Tetris. The 777 taxied to runway 27L, the left of Heathrow's two parallel runways. Standard stuff. The engines spooled up with that distinctive turbine whine. At 12:08 p.m., the captain released the brakes and 250 tons of aircraft started rolling down the concrete. V1. The speed where you're committed to take off no matter what. Unless the wings fall off, you're going up. Rotate. The nose lifts. The main gear leaves the ground. And just like that, Flight 762 was airborne. Climbing through the cloudy British sky. Retracting its landing gear. Absolutely normal in every conceivable way. The 777 leveled off at 37,000 feet, about 40 minutes into the flight. The seatbelt sign had long since clicked off. Flight attendants were making their way down the aisles with the beverage cart. Some passengers were dozing off. Others buried in books or staring at their phones in airplane mode like they might magically get signal. The captain and first officer were monitoring the instruments. Everything looked perfect. Fuel consumption right on target. Weather ahead was clear. Oslo was reporting beautiful conditions. This was shaping up to be the most boring flight of the month. And that's when the left engine decided it had other plans. At 12:47 p.m., barely an hour into what should have been a 2-hour flight, a catastrophic failure occurred inside the General Electric GE 9085B engine mounted on the left wing. Not a little hiccup. Not a sensor glitch. Metal shredding, fire-breathing disaster. Inside the engine's core, one of the high-pressure compressor blades broke free. Now you have to understand something about jet engines. They're basically controlled explosions spinning at 10,000 revolutions per minute. Extremely precise. Extremely balanced. When a blade breaks loose, it's like throwing a wrench into a blender set to puree. The broken blade fragments slammed into adjacent blades. Those broke off. Which hit more blades. Which broke off. Within seconds, the compressor section was tearing itself apart in a cascading failure that engineers call an uncontained engine failure. Uncontained means the metal didn't stay inside the engine where it belongs. It went everywhere. Shrapnel punched through the engine casing like bullets through cardboard. Some pieces embedded in the wing. Others ricocheted into the fuselage. The engine was literally eating itself alive. In the cockpit, Warning lights lit up like a Christmas tree. Master caution. Engine fire. The fire warning bell. That urgent ding-ding-ding that makes every pilot's blood pressure spike. The captain glanced at his instruments and saw exactly what he didn't want to see. Engine 1, the left engine, showing massive vibration. And the fire warning. Solid red. Without hesitation, he ran the memory items. The procedures drilled into every commercial pilot's brain until they can do them in their sleep. Throttle to idle. Fuel lever, cut off. Fire handle, pull. The fire handle does several things at once. It shuts off fuel to the engine. It closes the hydraulic lines. It arms the fire suppression system. One pull, multiple critical actions. The first officer was already on the radio. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. British Airways 762. We have an engine fire and need to return to Heathrow immediately. Air traffic control in London came back instantly. When someone says Mayday, you don't ask questions. You clear airspace. British Airways 762. Roger. Turn left, heading 270. Descend and maintain flight level 200. Vectors for runway 27L. But here's where things get interesting. Shutting down an engine. That's something pilots train for constantly. Losing an engine is serious, but modern aircraft are designed to fly just fine on one. It's called ETOPS certification. Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. Proof that you can lose an engine and still make it somewhere safe. The problem wasn't the shutdown. The problem was the fire wasn't going out. Despite pulling the fire handle, despite cutting fuel, the fire warning was still screaming at them. The engine was still burning. And not just a little residual fuel burning off. We're talking sustained fire. The kind that can burn through wing structures. The kind that can cause a wing to fail. The captain made a decision. He pressed the fire extinguisher button. Inside the engine nacelle, a bottle of halon fire suppressant discharged. This stuff is nasty. It displaces oxygen and stops combustion cold. One shot usually does the trick. The fire warning stayed lit. He pressed the second bottle. Every aircraft has redundancy, 2 chances to put out the fire. The fire warning stayed lit. Now they had a problem. A big one. They were 150 miles from Heathrow with an engine that was actively on fire and not responding to any suppression attempts. Oh, and they were flying over one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. In the cabin, passengers knew something was very wrong. The aircraft had banked hard left, descending rapidly. That's not normal for a flight to Oslo. Then came the smell. Acrid. Chemical. The unmistakable scent of something burning. A few passengers sitting on the left side of the aircraft had front row seats to the horror show. They could see flames and smoke pouring from the engine. Not little wisps. Actual flames. The kind you see in disaster movies. One passenger later described it as surreal. She'd been reading a magazine when she glanced out the window and saw fire streaming from the engine. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Then she realized everyone else on her side of the plane was staring at the same thing. The flight attendants, bless them, kept their cool. They're trained for this. When passengers started panicking, the senior flight attendant got on the PA system. Her voice was calm. Professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a technical issue with one of our engines. The captain is returning us to Heathrow as a precaution. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Technical issue. The understatement of the year. But panic spreads faster than fire on an airplane. Keeping people calm was priority one. In the cockpit, the pilots were running calculations. They were descending, but they needed to burn off fuel. Landing a 777 at maximum takeoff weight is possible, but not ideal. The landing gear and brakes aren't designed for that kind of stress. But with an engine on fire, they didn't exactly have time for a leisurely fuel dump. The captain made another call. We're landing heavy. I'm not circling with this thing burning. Smart decision. The Boeing 777 has a maximum landing weight about 100,000 pounds less than its maximum takeoff weight. Flight 762 was about 80,000 pounds over the ideal landing weight. That meant they'd be slamming a lot more mass onto the runway than the aircraft preferred. The brakes would have to work overtime. The landing gear would take a beating. But the alternative, flying around for another 45 minutes to burn fuel while the wing potentially burned through, not an option. Heathrow had been alerted. This was now a full emergency. Fire trucks were scrambling to position. Ambulances lined up. The big ones that can dump thousands of gallons of fire retardant were rolling to predetermined positions along the runway. The airport's emergency operations center activated. When a mayday comes in, especially for something as serious as an uncontained engine fire, protocols kick in immediately. Runways get cleared. Other traffic gets held. Every emergency service within 20 miles gets notified. Flight 762 was vectored for a straight-in approach to runway 27L, the same runway it had departed from an hour earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The captain briefed the approach. Single-engine landing. Overweight. Suspected structural damage to the wing from engine debris. Long landing to give maximum runway length. Full braking. If the brakes failed or caught fire, they'd evacuate on the runway. The first officer ran the checklists. The approach checklist. The landing checklist. The engine out landing checklist. Everything by the book, even though their hearts were hammering. At 8 miles out, they had visual contact with the runway. The fire trucks were visible, lined up like toys. Heathrow had shut down the entire airport. Every departure, every arrival, all held, and it was on fire. The approach was textbook. The captain kept the speed slightly higher than normal. With one engine out and potential wing damage, he wanted extra margin, extra energy. The ability to go around if things went sideways. Though going around with a burning engine seemed like a terrible idea. 3 miles out. Landing gear down. 3 green lights. The gear had extended normally. That was good news. With debris potentially damaging hydraulic lines, there'd been real concern the gear might not deploy. 1 mile. The runway was rushing up to meet them. The first officer called altitudes. 500, 400, 300. The 777 crossed the threshold at 160 knots, about 15 knots faster than a normal landing. The captain eased back on the yoke. The main gear kissed the concrete with a chirp of rubber. Not exactly a gentle touchdown, but considering they were 80,000 pounds overweight with an engine on fire, it was beautiful. Nose gear down. Full thrust reversers on the good engine. Maximum braking. The 777 decelerated hard, pressing everyone forward against their seatbelts. The brakes were screaming. Literally, you could hear them from inside the cabin. The aircraft slowed through 80 knots. Then 60. At 20 knots, the captain steered off onto a high-speed taxiway and brought the aircraft to a full stop. "Shut down the right engine," he ordered. The first officer complied. Both engines were now off. The aircraft sat silent except for the whine of cooling metal and the approaching sirens. Outside, the cavalry arrived. Fire trucks surrounded the 777 within seconds. Foam cannons opened up, dumping thousands of gallons of suppressant onto the burning engine. Within 2 minutes, the fire was out. Actually out this time. The captain got on the PA. "Cabin crew, remain seated. Do not evacuate. I repeat, do not evacuate." Evacuating an aircraft unnecessarily causes injuries. They get trampled. They panic and create more problems. With the fire out, and the aircraft safely on the ground, there was no reason to evacuate. Emergency crews did a walk-around inspection. The left engine was destroyed. Absolutely mangled. Parts of the casing were missing. The wing showed impact damage from debris, but the fuel tanks were intact. The wing structure appeared sound. The fire had been confined to the engine itself. After 15 minutes of assessment, the fire chief gave the all-clear. Passengers could deplane normally via stairs. No slides. No panic. Just a very, very relieved group of people who just experienced the flight from hell. The passengers filed off. Many visibly shaken. Some were crying. Others were on their phones immediately calling loved ones. A few were already on social media posting photos of the damaged engine. Within an hour, images of the burnt-out GE90 were trending worldwide. 0 fatalities. 0 serious injuries. A handful of passengers were checked out by paramedics for anxiety and stress, but everyone walked away. The crew had executed flawlessly. Despite catastrophic engine failure, had performed exactly as designed, and the emergency response had been textbook perfect. So what caused it? What makes a nearly new engine on a 777 just decide to explode mid-flight? The investigation by the Air Accidents Investigation Branch, the UK's version of the NTSB, took months. They pulled the engine apart piece by piece, examined every fragment, ran metallurgical tests, interviewed the crew, pulled maintenance records. The culprit? A single high-pressure compressor blade. Specifically, a blade that had developed a fatigue crack. Not from poor maintenance. Not from foreign object damage. Just metal fatigue. The blade had been through thousands of temperature cycles. Thousands of hours of stress. And finally, the microscopic crack that had been growing for who knows how long reached critical size. The blade failed. And once one blade goes, the cascade is almost impossible to stop. The broken blade hit adjacent blades. Those broke off and hit more blades. Within seconds, the entire compressor stage was destroying itself. The imbalance caused catastrophic vibration. The casing couldn't contain the debris, and the metal fragments punched through into the fuel system, igniting the fire. The fire suppression system failed because the fire wasn't inside the normal combustion area. It was in the wing structure where fuel lines had been damaged. The halon bottles couldn't reach it. The fire burned until there was no more fuel to burn, and by then the plane was on the ground with foam trucks doing the job the onboard systems couldn't. General Electric issued a service bulletin. Airlines worldwide inspected their GE90 engines. Similar cracks were found in other engines, all removed from service. The FAA issued an airworthiness directive. The aviation world learned once again that redundancy and training save lives. British Airways Flight 762 never made it to Oslo that day. The passengers were put up in hotels, rebooked on later flights, and compensated. The aircraft, G Vado, was eventually repaired. The engine was replaced, the wing was fixed, and the 777 returned to service, flying for several more years before retirement. The captain and first officer received commendations for their handling of the emergency. They'd done everything right. Identified the problem, made sound decisions under pressure, brought everyone home alive. And that's the thing about aviation. It's not that things never go wrong. Stuff breaks. Metal fatigues. Engines fail. What matters is the layers of protection, the redundancy, the fact that modern aircraft are designed to survive catastrophic failures and still get everyone on the ground safely. Flight 762 is a textbook example of everything working as designed. A horrifying engine failure that should have been a disaster. But thanks to engineering, training, and a little bit of luck, it was just another Tuesday where everyone got to go home and hug their families. The next time you're on a plane and you hear that turbine whine during takeoff, remember that inside those engines, blades are spinning at impossible speeds and extreme temperatures. It's controlled chaos. A miracle of engineering. It reminds us that flying is still one of the safest ways to travel precisely because the industry learns from every single failure. Flight 762 landed safely with 170 people on board, all of them with a hell of a story to tell, and a newfound appreciation for the phrase technical difficulty. Because sometimes, technical difficulty means your engine exploded at 37,000 feet, and you lived to tell about it.